You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me today are Jeff Franke and Anna Wells. We've been editors for manufacturing.net and IEN.com, covering the manufacturing industry for the better part of 15 years now. Every week, we take the 5 biggest stories on our websites and discuss the implications they might have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Jeff, how you doing this week?
Not too bad, David. You know, I was tired, but Anna, I popped open a Mountain Dew, and now I'm feeling great.
Whoa, you should do something extreme now, like snowboard.
It's gross.
We do a podcast.
You do an
gross.
extreme podcast.
Anna, how you doing?
Fine.
Yeah? Can you taste the Mountain Dew?
Oh.
The reflection of it is giving me a tan. All right. Our first story this week. Nikola founder faces fraud charges. Trevor Milton resigned from Nikola in September amid allegations of fraud. The startup focuses on electric and hydrogen-powered trucks. On Thursday, Milton surrendered on criminal charges for making false and misleading statements about the company and duping novice investors. For example, Milton said the company had early success at creating a fully functioning semi-truck prototype known as the Nikola 1, when he knew that the prototype was inoperable. He also said the company built an electricity and hydrogen-powered pickup truck known as the Badger, and even said the company was producing hydrogen at a reduced cost when they weren't making any at any cost. Anna, the list of lies on this one I found impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive for sure. I'm going to kick off by throwing our listeners a curveball and take what I think is probably usually Jeff's position on this one. But the part of the story that I didn't like, guys, was how the indictment details how he's duped all these investors with no prior experience in the market. And I guess the wording of the indictment is intended to make him look like a massive jerk, but I don't know that it's the responsibility of any company to account for the knowledge baseline and like naivete of people, quote, with no prior experience in the stock market who began trading during the coronavirus pandemic to replace or supplement income that they had lost or to occupy their time during the lockdown, unquote.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'm all about finding ways to protect people that can't protect themselves if they need it, whatever. But can we also just acknowledge that when people hop online and start like a TD Ameritrade account or a Robinhood, or they start buying stocks and they're assuming some risk there, correct? I mean, whether a business commits fraud, fraud is fraud, right? That's unilaterally, like, regardless of the investor. I don't think it's worse or better based on the type. I don't know. I thought that was weird how much they dove into that specific point. I mean, this guy's got a lot of problems to deal with, obviously, but like, just because you don't know what you're doing, like... Yeah,
it reminded me of a person complaining about losing at the craps table the first time they tried.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, doesn't it sound like there must have been one of these investors that had some clout somewhere and really started shaking some trees and in order to get this much focused and just this vehemently angry at this guy?
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not without merit, though. He obviously made some outrageous claims, but where are we finding these guys to head up these startups? I understand he's a founder, but there is so much similar to this with the Lordstown dynamic.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, look at Steve Burns. He was the former CEO of Lordstown. They got kicked out of there. The guy had no engineering, no manufacturing background, barely any automotive background at all. And he was going to be heading up Lordstown Motors with all of these huge plans, all of this money coming in. This was similar. When you look at the background of Trevor Milton, basically there's some discrepancy as the first company he worked with. He dropped out of college. He was working for a security company. He says he was bought out for like $250,000. The other people are like, we kind of told him to go away. Then he tried doing this online classified ad business for selling used vehicles that flopped. And then he did manage to kind of hitch onto some of these hydrogen technology companies. And that's how we founded Nikola. But again, like, there was no qualifications here. And I understand a lot of these folks, they saw a non-gasoline powered vehicle company. They were following sort of the wave of momentum that was behind it. But if they would have looked at this individual who was making all of these claims and with no merit and no understanding of what they were, on the other side of that, we've been I have at least been sort of critical of Elon Musk in terms of what he does and the way he chooses to run Tesla. He was the product guy. There was no doubting his engineering or science prowess there. It was more everything else. It's the stuff that he was saying, either communication or marketing wise, or some of his forecasting and the financials. This guy, man, just saying a bunch of stuff that was not even close to true in terms of what they were capable of producing. And I mean, did you see some of this stuff? It was way, way too similar to Lordstown, even down to the prototype that didn't work, and they rolled it down a hill in order to get some footage. There was a door they had to tape on to the frame in order for it to look legit.
Yeah.
So those are pretty outrageous, fraudulent claims to make. I do agree with Anna in terms of the backlash that's coming against him from the investment side of things.
Yeah.
This should have all been coming internally, like, get this guy out of here.
Yeah, I agree.
We've got a valid idea. We've got some technology behind it. He is the wrong person. And I mean, things came to fruition and he's not there anymore. But man, just need to get better people running these places.
So I think part of the problem is that with startups is that it's always a small group of entrepreneurs who aren't necessarily great at anything. You know, they have a great idea. They're looking for the right people. It reminded me a lot of, I read Mark Randolph's book. He was a co-founder of Netflix. He wrote the book That Will Never Work. And he acknowledges that he was the man to get Netflix off the ground. But once it was up and running and a company, he's not your guy anymore. And he had to move on. And I think that's part of the problem with some of these CEOs is that, you know, they start as a founder, they become an exec, and then they think, you know, because they made it a multi-billion-dollar company, they should still be at the helm, and maybe they're not the best person anymore.
Right. They know nothing about product development, nothing about manufacturing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be tapping this guy in particular on the shoulder, because it seems like he also had sort of an infatuation with his personal worth. We ran a story today about, at one point, his stock options were worth over $8 billion.
For this company?
Yeah.
For a company that has never produced a product?
Right.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense, right?
Well, the other thing, to your point, another thing about that was similar to Lordstown was how they lied about he lied about reservations versus actual orders in terms of what they had coming in. But what I was curious about when it came to startup CEOs is what is the breaking point between the fake it until you make it as a CEO and fraud? So
when you try to list your company on the stock market,
but it's like
different rules apply. I mean,
no, I understand that, and it's like it reminded me of that Theranos CEO, Elizabeth Holmes, with a blood screening startup, and she just, you know, they were really close, maybe not as close as she was telling anybody. Well, actually, they were never as close as she was telling people, but you know, essentially trying to buy time until the dream is realized. You know, talking about Elon Musk. When he talks about Tesla being a month away from bankruptcy during the Model 3 ramp, I mean, I feel like part of that is that role of the startup executive is you got to fake it till you make it.
True, but when they're faking, they're talking about, especially with Musk, is like, it'll be ready, not we're doing these things, we have this technology. I mean, this guy was so clueless. Yeah. He was even talking about stuff they were developing versus things they were sourcing.
Oh, yeah.
And then you bring in the truck that they were supposedly making, the Badger truck that was going to actually compete with like Lordstown.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just operating in a different stratosphere in terms of what reality really was for this company. Fake it till you make it. I mean, I get that, but you can't just completely make up a different reality from what you're living in. I mean, I
get it. You can't tell people that you're developing new battery technology and other components and just sourcing them from a third party. I mean, isn't the third party when they're reading the art, because he lied in articles, podcasts,
yeah.
You know, the list of things that he lied in was actually also impressive. But I mean, do you think the third party's just sitting there like, nuh-uh?
Well,
you know?
At some point, I mean, they probably aren't too concerned if they're still getting orders and it's working. Like, you know, I'm not too worried about it.
True.
It's just when things start falling apart, which they obviously have, that's when it becomes an issue.
And to take advantage of the people that were bored during the pandemic is unconscionable.
Poor novice investors looking to supplement their income by choosing Robinhood instead of online poker is just incredulous garbage.
Settle down.
I gotta say,
Too much Mountain Dew?
Of the people I feel sympathy for, novice investor is never gonna be high. But it did remind me of like when I became the cooler at a craps table the first time playing, and just Like no one, I mean, I wasn't complaining to anybody. I'm just like, yeah, this is all on me. I didn't understand what I was doing, and I lost a lot of money for myself and a lot of people. And I bowed out. All right. Next most popular story. Glenfiddich fueling trucks with leftover whiskey. Typically, Glenfiddich would sell off spent grains from the malting process to be used in cattle feed. But now the company has found a new use for it. The company is updating its delivery trucks to operate on low-emission biogas generated by waste products from the whiskey distilling process. The tech converts production waste into an ultra-low carbon fuel gas. Biogas is currently used in 3 trucks that typically run on liquefied natural gas, but it could one day be used to fuel more trucks for parent company William Grant & Sons, which owns multiple Scotch whiskeys, Irish whiskey Tullamore Dew, and Hendrick's Gin, the gin of all gins, the best gin,
The gin of champions.
the gin of this champion. Anna, I thought this to be a really cool story, how they were using a byproduct for fuel.
Yeah, you did think it was a really cool story.
The gin of gins.
The gin of gins,
in this
Ginnerton.
cup. Oh, yeah.
David Ginnerton Manty.
I'll switch it. It'll be hyphenated.
I enjoyed the story. I thought it was fascinating that like this R&D play, like the application for this came actually from the parent company of Glenfiddich, William Grant & Sons, which is pretty impressive emphasis for a beverage company, right?
Mhm.
They only sell spirits. However, like they boast of this entrepreneurial spirit within the company. And I think a lot of companies say this, but in this case, it actually checks out. So they have, they also have this brand called Discarded that uses products that would otherwise go to waste, including a rum that's flavored with cascara, which is the berry on coffee plants that's otherwise not being used. They're also working on a rum made with would-be discarded banana peels.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I
Yeah.
mean, like it's cool, right? I mean, they
Oh, it's
had
very cool.
they have a blockchain whiskey bottle that allows shoppers to digitally track their whiskey's production journey. Like they're
Okay,
they're
that's
just doing
awesome.
Cool.
a lot
That's
of crazy
cool.
cool
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So they've also credited themselves with, quote, their leading role in reinvigorating the gin industry, which I don't believe they're giving David quite enough credit for
I'm
the
doing it
boost
case by case,
to
guys.
the gin
Well,
industry.
and his gin preference has definitely evolved over time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've moved up the shelf.
Yeah.
As we've moved further into our career, we've moved up the shelf. There's actually words on the bottles I'm buying now.
At least
Yeah.
when you can read them.
So, and I got to say, I hear, banana peels, and that sounds cool, but I immediately think 99 bananas.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be better on the palates given their body of work. Jeff, what did you think of this story?
I can't believe everybody has a 99 banana story. Like that's pretty obscure.
I used to
Boy.
bartend. We had the same
Oh.
bottle for like 14 years. I don't know. There's like this much left in it.
That's horrible.
You get what is it, the bridal shower or the bachelorette party? Dust off the 99 bananas.
That was the shot they were giving away. Like
Mystery
as a
shot.
poor
The mystery
college
shot.
student, like, what do you got?
Yeah. It's the mystery bottle.
Ugh. Yeah, very cool. And I think we're seeing a lot of these processing companies, and in particular some distilleries, really come out with some cool technologies, ways that they've been able to sort of reformulate what they have on hand to either create some new products, or even during the pandemic, we saw a lot of distilleries coming out with hand sanitizer and other things
True,
to
yeah.
help. So a lot of cool stuff coming out of there. I think some of this may come a little bit too from the fact that this is a beverage company. Now, it's not like they're producing orange juice or some other things that are much more price sensitive or margin sensitive. There is a better margin on alcoholic products, but still, I think when you're operating in that environment, you can't afford to be wasteful. If you have something that can be turned into a viable product in some way, shape, or form, they're looking at it very closely. And kudos to these folks at Glenfiddich for finding a way to take something they have on hand and make it not just use it so it's not wasted, but it's a really sensible application. It makes all the sense in the world. I was also thinking a little bit about our conversation last week, Jeff Bezos wanting to build stuff on the moon as opposed to basically looking at what he could do in his own business to help improve things from
Yeah.
an environmental perspective. And these guys are doing it in a real common sense way. So
Kind of feel bad for the cows, though. Can you imagine your feed being switched out? And it's just like, this used to taste better.
wow.
Also-
That's such sympathy.
Well, I mean, all of a sudden,
It's an interesting take, David.
all of a sudden the feed switches out, and you're
hottest
just
take.
like,
Thinking of the cows.
Yeah.
this used to be more of a high-end grain
Yeah.
with a better finish. I'm curious about. I'm curious about
How's
how
our
it
knowing
smells.
for their refined palates?
Exactly. They're a discerning group. How does it smell? Do you think? Because we have the local pizza place that turned their fleet of delivery vehicles using biogas, and man, you smell that. You smell the grease from the fryer coming as they're delivering. So that's the only thing I was curious about as to whether or not they'd figured that out. The other is how you kind of talk about how upcycling is an emerging category. And so I looked into other things that spent brewing grains have been used to. They've been baked into crackers, made into bread, and even made into dog treats. So I thought that was pretty way to upcycle.
Well, did you see the comment on the site? The one guy said Alaska Brewing is actually doing a similar thing with the cakes that they're actually burning for fuel.
Oh, for fuel, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to plug Alaska Brewing because their beer is fantastic. If you need a unsolicited spokesperson, Alaska Brewing, just let me know.
Well, lost food is lost money in that space. And so there was a creamery that recently repurposed its way to make a new carbonated drink. And a pickle factory, this is what I found interesting, is making a new savory vegetable drink with leftover brine.
Blah. I also want to go back to lightly sweetened, whey carbonated drink. Blah. Blah.
You got to try it out.
No.
It's good for the planet and good for you. Oh, gross.
So
Jeff. Mountain don't.
Very good. Next story this week. The first story was 1 dead, 4 missing in German chemical explosion, but it continued to update throughout the week. An explosion shook an industrial park for chemical companies in Germany on Tuesday. As of Friday, 5 workers were found dead at the chemical manufacturing site, with a couple still missing and more than 30 injured. The official cause of the blast still isn't known, but Carenta, the company that operates ChemPark, says the explosion was linked to storage tanks filled with solvents. The explosion happened at the waste management facility at the ChemPark site. City officials warned people not to let their children play outside, use outside pools, or even eat fruit or vegetables from their backyards for the next couple of days. And Anna, the first thing I thought was, maybe you just throw that fruit out.
Yeah, maybe just move on from that.
Yeah.
I read an interesting follow-up report in the German public broadcaster Deutsche Welle's website, and they talked a lot about the chemical industry in Germany. And so these chem parks are kind of located quite like up and down the Rhine River. And they said that the chemical capital of Germany is Cologne, this region. So anyway, they posted this article that explains like why there are so many chemical plants in Germany and why they are so close to cities. Because I think that's kind of alarming when you see just how close these chem parks are to major cities like Cologne. One of the points that they made is that the chemical parks combine so many companies together on the same grounds that they're appealing because they actually enhance safety for these companies. They say that the parks are capable of supporting the necessary safety infrastructure, like fire departments that are specially trained in like handling hazardous substances or putting out chemical fires. So like we discussed recently with that fire at VW, when there's a dedicated on-site crew that can handle emergency scenarios and be first on the scene, then you can really limit the impact. But this city where the fire took place, it was sort of built up around the chemical industry in the 1800s, and many chemical companies began collaborating with one another using the Rhine River. And so Deutsche Welle contends that the chemical factory density in these urban areas is actually a safety benefit, though it's hard to see that a bit when you're a resident probably receiving these kind of warnings, which are terrifying. And if it makes you nervous, just know that this concept was actually copied by a lot of other regions, the like chem park concept.
Yeah.
So it's being used a lot in China as well, where they have just concentrated a lot of these chemical companies all together.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, I got to say
FYI.
that sounds good to me though, because when you look at it, they have 3 different facilities in the region with 70 different companies operating at them. You know, Bayer is still one of the largest companies there, but one of your points last week was that, some companies can't afford to have their own on-site EMS services, stuff like that. So, maybe that is a benefit. Whereas when there's a tragedy like this, it does put a lot of people in the area at risk. But
Yeah, I mean, fair point. Like if other industrial parks were run in a similar way, where you sort of co-op services and everybody has pitches in to kind of support some of that safety infrastructure, that would be interesting. You don't see a lot of that outside of this industry, I don't think.
Jeff, what were your thoughts on the story?
Well, I'll take the other side of that because this is a unique setup with this chem park dynamic. It also sort of masks accountability, though, because you have all of these companies here. It still has not been made public who was actually at fault. They talk about these big companies, Bayer and the other one escapes me. Hope I'm saying this correctly. Leverkusen.
Sounds good to me, Jeff.
Yeah,
Lanxess. Lanxess was the other big chemical company that also operates there, but there's also like 30 other companies in this complex. It's 8 square miles. So who was at fault?
That's
who do you come back to? Because
yeah.
I mean, you're talking about fruits and vegetables. They closed down playgrounds. They told kids to take their shoes off before they went in the house because they aren't sure what's going on with all the particulates in the air because they don't know which chemical it was, which plant it came from. So yeah, I get having that infrastructure from a safety perspective and maybe even a best practices perspective, but it also kind of lets you hide a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, because I don't think one company is responsible for this. I think the park is responsible because it happened at a waste management facility. And so I think these storage tanks filled with solvents might have been from multiple manufacturers. And, that's part of the infrastructure that they pay for that is supposed to protect them. And that looks what failed.
Even still, somebody is ultimately accountable.
Oh,
and
yeah.
to say it's just, this 8-mile facility or 8 square mile facility or area, again, there has to be somebody at the end of the day, because in this sector, what we've learned is unless somebody actually is at fault, nobody learns.
Yeah.
And there isn't any more proactive measures taken to avoid this type of thing happening.
No, and it was, anytime it's a chemical explosion and there's unknown substances going into the air or water, that's what I find to be the biggest threat.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Next most popular story this week. GM is suing Ford over Blue Cruise. General Motors thinks that Ford's Blue Cruise driver assist technology infringes on the patent it holds for its own hands-free driving technology, Super Cruise. GM's Super Cruise was unveiled in 2012, though it wasn't used until 2017, and Ford didn't have a rival until this year. Ford says that it was, quote, left with no choice but to sue, claiming that Ford knew what it was doing. Ford fired back, saying that GM is being inconsistent with its response because it has had 0 issues with other cruise names, like Hyundai's Smart Cruise and BMW's Active Cruise Control. Ford says that the word cruise has been used for decades by every automaker. Think of cruise control, and notes that this is just an upgrade. GM is hoping to block Ford's use of the name and make them pay for it. Anna, it seems like a weird word to go after. And, I'd hate to blame GM for being litigious, but this seems a little patty cake to me.
But you are, yeah?
Yeah.
I know. It's hard for me not to side with Ford on this one when they lay out their points about how GM didn't go after any of those other automakers for using cruise in their, system names that we're applying to basically enhanced technologies, right? So they basically contend that the word cruise has been applied for so long in a general sense, I think, that it's taken kind of a shorthand meaning, and I'd have to agree with that. If you look back on the history of cruise control, there were a lot of visionaries involved, but this is the most interesting one. So I read a report by the Smithsonian that said that cruise control was actually invented in the mid-1950s by a blind engineer named Ralph Teeter. Have you heard this before?
No.
So he called it Speedostat. And it was designed at a time when accidents at highway speeds were catastrophic.
Yeah.
And I think they instituted a really low speed limit after World War II. So Chrysler was the first to implement Speedostat, though they called it autopilot.
Oh.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, which we've discussed autopilot at length on this show. But GM was the company that first called it cruise control, though the term cruise control seems to have been co-opted over time and used by nearly every automaker. So at the time, though, Popular Mechanics described Speedostat as a kind of power-operated accelerator or governor with extras. And it said, it definitely takes us several miles farther down the road to automatic pilot for cars.
And what year was that it came out?
It came out in the mid 1950s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know. It's some historians say that Ralph Teeter had no vision for like autonomous vehicles because the context of that was just so outside of, he was born in I don't know, a long time ago. But it does seem like it was maybe the first step towards this. And for me, Ford's argument that cruise applies to the evolution of automation technology, I think it holds up. I mean, as far as I can tell, nobody owns the word cruise. And if somebody does, then Carnival Cruise Lines will be mad. They have to change their name to like Carnival Big Boats.
If Ford could always pivot and go back with Speedostat.
Speedostat.
It's got a great history.
It is, yeah.
I mean, Jeff, is GM just being a fly in the ointment?
I just don't understand why they're even caring. Like, of all the things they got, first of all, they're coming off a great quarter.
They are.
40% increase in sales over last year. Okay. Now, last year sucked for everybody, but still, that's a huge thing to tout. And even bigger than that is they saw record deliveries of their Bolt EV. So build on that and focus on that. They've also been a lot of positive play from Wall Street because of their focus on electric vehicles. We're talking about a technology that has drawn nothing but negative criticism and negative attention because of Tesla and their autopilot. This is a hands-off driving technology. Let it be. I mean, you don't buy a vehicle because it has a similar technology to another company. There's a lot of other factors, and these two things look basically the same. So what if they're called the same thing or similar to it? I mean, it's like putting a different look at all the different things that have come from road support in terms of like, it started with OnStar, and everybody has their own version of that. Who cares if I'm calling a vehicle that has OnStar, but it's not called OnStar? The same thing. That's not why I bought the vehicle. It's the same technology. So for them to focus this much energy on this particular thing is just surprising to me. They have great stuff to talk about. And the reality is, since 2016, GM's global sales have been down year over year. They finally have a chance to right that ship. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Do you think, is hands-free driving an extension of cruise control, or is it a new feature? Is it a new technology?
I think that it is an extension of automated safety technology. So I think they're in the same wheelhouse. To me, they are.
I'd agree.
Yeah. All right. Our most popular story this week: Toyota lobbies against electric vehicles. Toyota has been exposed for opposing stricter emissions limits and electric vehicle initiatives around the world. While the automaker says it embraces electric vehicles and is working to reduce its overall emissions, it says that the expectations for such a fast transition from gas vehicles to electric ones is unrealistic, and that hybrids should continue to play a role. Some say the company is merely in panic mode after years of betting on the wrong horse in a race to clean up the auto sector. Toyota brought gas electric hybrids into the mainstream and also invested heavily in hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, but those vehicles remain expensive and the infrastructure just isn't there. Toyota has reportedly gone from an industry leader to the worst in the auto industry when it comes to corporate climate lobbying. And I found that shocking.
Yeah, I don't, because I've been kind of trying to follow this. They've had a lumpy couple of years with all their competitors putting out these extensive EV lines and Toyota just being like, nope, we're sticking with hydrogen. We're going to keep doing the hybrid thing. And I don't know. It seems a little bit like sour grapes, maybe, for putting their eggs in the wrong basket. I mean, they seem to want to have it both ways here. If they're acknowledging that all electric vehicles are the future and they seem fully capable of producing them for the Chinese market, then maybe this was just a misstep with the U.S. market. But all that being said, I could see hybrids, especially plugins, being a valuable stepping stone, especially for people who have this sort of unshakable concern about the lack of infrastructure for public charging, which is kind of non-existent right now still.
Right.
I know that makes a lot of people nervous, right? So the idea of having like a backup tank, maybe that's valuable to some people. However, I think the problem is that the government and also the public, they have a really hard time differentiating between performance hybrids and hybrids that are designed to cut gasoline-related fossil fuel emissions.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of those hybrids fall so short on their storage capacity that they're really not making the kind of dent that we really desperately need. I mean, if you look at the plugins that are on the market today, and there's a lot of them, the EV range for most of them is like 20, 30 miles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have the time to monkey around with that. I think that they say, if Toyota's saying that like we can't transition fast enough, we need these as a crutch, I think this will slow it down.
Yeah.
So I guess I see why they're doing it from a business perspective. I don't think it's the right move, though.
Well, Jeff, when it comes to a public with unshakable concern over the technology, I think that's where you come in. And so maybe these
Unshakable concern.
over EVs.
Well, no, about the fact that we don't have a very good public charging infrastructure. Although most people charge their EVs at home,
Right.
and they don't drive them across the country. You know, at this point in time, that's just not been done yet. But
Sorry, not unshakable concern. Skepticism
skepticism.
over EVs.
Well, my whole thing is, first of all, just looking at it from a consumer's perspective, okay, Toyota's not wrong, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Again, here in the U.S., and we're in a little bit of a vacuum, and we've said this many times, 1% of vehicle sales are EVs, okay? So it's not mass demand right now. So when you look at the things that are going on societally right now, Toyota has a point. If they're going to offer products that allow for this transition to be made more incrementally than all at once, and if people feel more comfortable with that, having a product that allows people to do that makes all the sense in the world. And if that's your business strategy, do that, tout that, talk about that, stick with that. But in today's political climate, to actively lobby against environmental
Right.
controls and EV beneficial EV regulations or guidelines, that's just a really, really bad idea, because this is what you get. I was a little disappointed because we were talking about this story a little bit before it ran. And I was hoping when I read it, it'd be like, Toyota's like, forget it. You know what? We're gonna launch the equivalent of like 500 horsepower, gas-powered muscle cars, just to be different.
Yeah.
Just to, we're really
Horsepower
going
Camry.
the other
It's like
way on this.
Camry
Yeah.
V12 we're going to put up.
Instead of just plugging their electric hybrids. But I get what they're saying, and it does make sense. But to take this approach with such a hard line is sort of, from a business perspective, just a bad move. I mean,
It's perplexing. It does not shine them in
Yeah,
a good light necessarily, I don't think. But
the one thing that I always think about with this, with electric vehicles, so right now, the one environmental argument I think is because obviously you have to plug them in. 60% of electricity is produced by burning fossil fuels. So potentially, if we do, and to Toyota's point here a little bit, if for somehow overnight we are able to transition to all electric vehicles, like the grid would have to pump out twice as much electricity. And we already have problems with our grid. So there is something to be said for more of a gradual increase in a transition, as opposed to, snapping your fingers and everything's different.
But I mean, I think some of these goals we're talking about, like 2035, 2040. So it's, I mean, Toyota, based on their history anyways, I would have a little bit of faith in them getting it done by then. But
well, everybody, and we've always talked about the consumer is going to drive this. What do they want? And that's what the car maker is going to provide. But again, with everybody setting these very strong limitations, and I think about myself, what I started out driving and what I drive now, at the end of the day, you want something safe, reliable, and if it costs less to operate, great.
Yeah.
I think we've transitioned a little bit. I think there is sort of a different mood with the American consumer, maybe outside of a lot of the truck drivers or pickup truck drivers and some people buying those. They still, I think, tend to look a little bit more at some of the old school dynamics of vehicle purchasing. But by and large, I think most people are ready to make a transition here. So we'll see what happens. But just them taking such a hard line was weird.
So at first it reminded me of, somebody like fighting for Betamax or fighting for HD DVD over Blu-ray. But then it made me think about like maybe they are just trying to buy time, because some of the analysts were saying that hydrogen fuel cells could still become competitive with EVs in the coming years. But for now, Toyota acknowledges that all electric vehicles are the future. So are they just, upset that they picked the wrong horse, or is it possible that they could buy time and hydrogen fuel cells could be realized?
I think it's a little bit of both. They did probably put too much into hydrogen. I think the infrastructure is just too tough. I think that's really difficult. I think the production aspect of it and producing those cells, it's not that different than producing an electric battery for a car.
Mhm.
Okay. It's more expensive right now because there's fewer of them. So I think that technology is there. It's more the refueling part of it that's going to be hard
Yeah.
when it comes to hydrogen. But I think it makes sense if this is your product line to offer again that sort of that gap of vehicle. If people don't want to go fully electric because they don't have confidence, because they want to be able to drive further, whatever the case is, so they can still use the electric part of it, but also have that reliance on a gas engine.
Mhm.
I get that. Again, what nobody understands is just coming out being opposed to it. That
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. All right. Anna, you ever buy a Betamax?
I'm not sure I know what that is. Is it? Oh, that was like the pre
That's
VCR.
VHS, yeah.
Yeah, no.
VHS or Betamax. No. It's all right. It's got a small place in my heart.
Those were like huge, right?
They were the tiny ones.
Oh, the Betamax were smaller.
Betamax were smaller, like large Betamax that they use, like some news stations and stuff like that still use Betamax, but they are the larger cassettes.
Did you buy laser discs too?
Ooh,
No,
we had
no,
those in
that's-
school.
Yeah,
They're
that's
like
the
giant
one.
CDs.
Yeah,
Like records.
No, I missed out on that one, and those are harder to find.
Those were like super expensive. I didn't have any, but like they were crazy expensive too.
Yeah, but then you think of how much data those discs hold now, but you still had to like flip them over. It was like to watch the second half of Back to the Future, turn
Right.
disc over now.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to In Case You Missed It. In Case You Missed It is a segment about, some of the stories that were not as popular on the websites, but maybe still stand to make a big impact on the industry. I'll go first with mine. A business sues a couple who left a 1-star Google review. And this one really touched close to home here. A Washington couple is getting sued for leaving a 1-star Google review for executive roof services and filing a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. They say that the roofing company's receptionist was rude to them and that they were denied access to a project report detailing work that was being done on their roof. The business owner demanded the couple take down their reviews and has now sued them for $112,000 for defamation. The couple, turns out, wasn't even entitled to the report because they hadn't hired their company. Their landlord did. So it's a bunch of renters doing this. And regardless, the couple should be legally protected if the review is truthful. And it just made me think of, how crazy reviews have gotten online. And I mean, I have friends that are like elite TripAdvisor commenters, the people that are like pros on Yelp and stuff like that. And it is just a reminder that, sometimes you can still be held, liable for things that you say online. And I mean, although I do kind of side with the couple here too, because I mean, it wasn't just one bad time with this receptionist. It was multiple. And eventually something had to be done and the keyboard warrior had to come out.
Yeah. Well, and the owner called them and was like, I know where you live. You should take this down before it goes any further. And he said something like, I have no problem spending a bunch of money and suing you, and was just really kind of nasty. So I don't think that helped. And, this legal expert that comments and said, like, I don't remember what his exact wording was. Like, I don't see how this is going to benefit the company.
No, yeah.
This is not
It was
going to work out
basically
well.
a bad look regardless for the company.
Yeah. So you just makes me think that like maybe someone's like just got an axe to grind over the situation and they're taking it to court, even though it is probably a very terrible idea and going to reflect poorly on their business. Like, remember that guy we covered that paid when the employee quit and he paid him all in pennies or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
And then
At the edge of the
everyone
driveway.
just stormed his like Google page.
The reviews,
And his ranking was down to like 1.5 stars because everyone had read the story and were just so like, I don't know, angered and offended by his treatment of this worker that they kind of tanked his reputation. And people can easily do that. I don't.
It's crazy that there is so much importance and weight on these rating systems. I mean, to his point, they really didn't have a right to this report. Who cares if the receptionist has got a problem? And I mean, they could do legitimate damage to this business just because, they were being a little pissy.
Well, this is the very definition of a pissing match.
Yeah.
I mean, they got pissed because the reception was mean to them and they couldn't get something that they didn't have access to begin with. So then they did that. So then the business owner, instead of just ignoring it and doing a good job, which would kind of knock this out and fix his rating, fires back. I mean, this is ridiculous. There's probably the reason you would assume that this business got so upset about this bad rating is because they probably had a bunch of bad ratings.
Yeah.
Okay. So then maybe the boss is talking to the receptionist, but you need to be nicer, and that makes her mad, so she gets pissed off when people call. I don't know. There just seems like this total cycle of ridiculous drama that just fed into this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Doesn't help your business, though.
It doesn't help your business. So for business owners, maybe a reminder that, customer service is, really big right now for a reason. And as a consumer, that is something that I kind of always hold like, it's sometimes.
Oh, you mean you hold a grudge?
I mean, every once in a while.
Little bit.
But when I have a negative experience, I know like, okay, at least I have this one thing that I can do and go and just, give you, especially like after you work with a company for as long as you can to try and find a resolution. It's just like, all right, I guess we're going to have to go 0 stars for you. And I'm going to use big words.
Well, I don't know though. You've been on Google before, right? And seen like some people will take the high road, they get a bad review, and they respond because you can do that.
Yeah.
And if you can sort of ask a question or give your side in a very respectful way, I will overlook those usually. You know what I mean?
Oh,
if
100%.
you see that the company is like on top of it, they're trying to address the reputation issue, but they're also still trying to deal with that customer in a polite way. I don't know.
That's actually a really good point because I have chosen companies with poor reviews or a couple of poor ratings because they responded with the entire story. Just like, as we said, every time you called, we didn't cause that issue. It's caused by this. And I'm
Right.
like, okay. So that also makes me think that, they're a little bit more accountable. So I don't know. It was just the incredible power of online ratings right now is insane. It's a little too much.
But also, like, as a consumer, to feel like you're being muzzled
True,
because
there's
someone
some
has more money than you and can take you to court. I mean, this woman that they interviewed her, and she was like crying to the reporter about how she doesn't have the money for this, and
Yeah.
it's a freaking roof leak, like to cause like that much despair in a person. It just seems like you said, Jeff, it's a pissing match.
Yeah. He did not just come out of nowhere and cause that despair in her. I think.
No, I know, but I just think that okay, so the reviews hold a lot of weight, yes, but like, is it fair to come at it then with the resources of a company and like take on like this?
Well, it was a bad move.
30-year-old
They're both kind of wrong here. But at the end of the day, the company is more wrong because, well, maybe you guys are different, but what's the first thing you do whenever you're looking for somebody to do anything?
I mean, I ask you to.
Exactly. You ask somebody.
So
anybody now who's ever heard of this roofing company,
yeah.
when they say, well, the first thing they're going to say is, well, don't go to these guys. So, I mean, come on, be smarter.
Yeah. All right. Anna, what was your in case you missed it this week?
So TV pitchman and inventor Ron Popeil has died at the age of 86. And when I learned this earlier in the week, I went down an absolute rabbit hole. It was not productive, but I enjoyed it. Because all of his old commercials are like on YouTube or whatever, so you can find them all. And I had forgotten about like all of the different products that he's been involved in. And also like the jargon that is credited as being like sort of invented by him, like set it and forget it.
Forget it.
Wait, there's more that, I remember all that stuff from my childhood, and I kind of relish the opportunity to explain to my children at some point what an infomercial was, because like they still don't understand it when my husband and I try to tell them that when we wanted to watch TV, we had to watch it at a time, and then if we missed it, we just missed it.
Yeah.
You could only watch it that
There's no
one
going
time.
back, yeah.
And they're like, what? Like that's not how Disney Plus works.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's sort of an uphill both ways kind of story. Like when I was a kid.
Well, we went to New York a couple years ago, and we went to 30 Rock. And I'm like, this is like NBC. This is where they made shows. And my kids are like, what does that mean?
Whatever. Yeah. What do you mean made shows?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're never going to understand spray hair in a can also.
Yeah. I mean, there's still an incredible market for infomercials out there. I mean, those tech specs or whatever feel like they play every other commercial. But, I mean, he was like pre-Billy Mays.
Yeah.
He was like, as soon as I saw this, I mean, it sounds weird to think that like a TV pitchman has a special place in your heart. But like when you're watching that like late night TV trying to fall asleep and you're like, I do need to dehydrate more foods.
Yeah, I mean, all of this food waste.
Yeah, and it
There's
just makes
got to be a better way.
it's cheaper way to make your
There's
own
got to be
jerky.
a better way.
That's right. No, man, but wait, there's more.
I know.
But wait, there's more.
The one that I remembered when I was reading through this was the Pocket Fisherman.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
Remember that one? That was good.
he had lots of cool stuff. And yeah, I don't know. Rest in peace, Ron Popeil. You will always have a place in my heart for the nostalgia. I would love to like sit through all those infomercials one more time, just like having a beer and like watch. It just sounds like it'd be a fun afternoon.
I enjoyed looking at the photo and the list of all the products and remembering how much I wanted them, and then like kind of having the sigh of relief that I didn't buy them. I didn't buy them, and I didn't get the second one for $1 either. Jeff, what was your in case you missed it?
So I'm gonna try to bring out my like summer blockbuster movie trailer voice.
Okay.
We're listening.
In a world where electric vehicle startups don't go away, Lordstown Motors is back.
So my story is about a hedge fund that came through and is giving Lordstown Motors $400 million to keep going. Now, for all the folks working at that plant, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Glad, good to see it. But you do have to wonder, like, what does it take for a non-gasoline automotive company to like go away?
Mm-hmm.
Because it just seems like there was so many nails potentially in the coffin here. They're still facing subpoenas and legal arguments and everything else. But this company, the name of the hedge fund is YA2PN Limited, which sounds a little shady, but it's actually Yorkstown Advisors. They're a legit hedge fund. They've got a bunch of other different funds out there working with a lot of different people. So it's legit. And they basically are going to be buying stock from Lordstown over the next 3 years to potentially keep this place going.
I want that job where you can just buy stock in companies that are accused of fraud and facing numerous lawsuits and just be like, well, didn't work out.
Yeah, and why'd they choose Lordstown and not Nikola?
I don't know. Maybe Nikola's next. Maybe someone will swoop in and save it.
Lordstown isn't publicly traded though, right? So all of their money has come from private funds.
I think you might be wrong about that, but I'm going to
because I know GM's got money in Lordstown.
It was an SEC filing. Okay. That they made this investment.
So yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting. I could not believe when I saw that somebody else they're sticking it out.
They are publicly traded.
They are. Okay.
But like we were talking about earlier, I mean, maybe Lordstown's fake it till you make it is at least working. It got them 3 more years.
Maybe it's the fact that it is a little bit more viable. I mean, Tesla's come out and said their truck isn't going to be ready as soon as they thought. So there is truck sales continue to go up. People are buying more of them. So maybe that's what these guys are looking at and thinking, hey, what's 400 million more?
Yeah. Well, and they just, their executives, a couple executives just stepped down, right? So maybe they'll
got some overhead costs.
Yeah, cleaned out some of the dead weight. We're going to do this now.
Well, I mean, like you said, at least base level for the people working in Lordstown, it's a great lifeline.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our final thoughts this week. Anna, what's your final thought?
I found out this week that olives are a fruit, and I would like to know when that happened.
Wow. I stopped at gross, and I didn't pursue the olive anymore.
Oh.
Just gross. Yeah.
I love olives, but
Yeah.
fruit?
That's weird.
I know, right? Like, and the fact that, like, I didn't know this whole time. This whole my life, I didn't know.
So as your kids get older, they'll play that whole thing like, well, this isn't really a fruit. This is a vegetable and all that.
They
kind of
already
garbage.
do that.
Yeah.
Tomatoes, a fruit,
Yeah. So throwing olives into the mix, I don't know. That doesn't seem fair.
So I guess that's why you can put them in a drink, because you're not like, I mean, if they were a vegetable.
A blue cheese stuffed olive, there might be nothing better. Love it.
Any other fruits that you would stuff with blue cheese, though? Not really.
No.
No, I don't think so. The fact that it's making David a little bit nauseous is just priceless.
Yeah.
We're going to have to replace
There are
this mic.
so few things, so few foods that can make David squirm.
Yeah.
That seems to be one of them.
No, the blue cheese stuffed olive is just so disgusting to me. And like the first time they came in a martini, I was just like, could you get the abomination out of there?
The abomination.
And then
even.
there's always somebody that's just like, oh, thank you. You're just like, and now I can smell them on you.
Yeah, it gets a little cloudy in that glass.
The only time olives are okay is when a small child is playing with them on their fingertips. It's the
That is
only time.
adorable.
Jeff, what is your final thought this week?
My final thought is I'm going to have one of those sort of nostalgic weekends because we talked about the Masters of the Universe, the He-Man cartoon that's on Netflix right now, which is a little more adult.
Mm-hmm.
And then this weekend I'm going to go see the G.I. Joe Snake Eyes movie.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So it's like the two favorite toys I had when I was like a kid. So somewhere 10-year-old me is super excited.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking forward to them too.
Yeah. Well, let me know what you think of this.
Yeah, it's been kind of crapped on, but I'll give it a run anyway.
That is the best time to go and see a movie, is when there have been nothing but negative reviews and you're just like, I don't know, I kind of liked it.
Well, I think what kind of like actually started this was that other Netflix documentary, The Toys That Made Us.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I think the thing that got me the most was like when I realized they used like the same production mold for every single one of the He-Man guys. They just painted them different and stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, like Man-at-Arms was the same size as He-Man?
Oh, yeah.
That ain't right.
Yeah. It's that show is incredible. And it kind of makes me think about how people right now are, what are the toys or the other items right now that, our kids or other generations will be nostalgic about further down the road.
Yeah.
Or is that something that's just kind of like, is that generational to us?
It's already circled back. So like my little girl's like strawberry shortcake. And that
yeah.
was like my thing when I was a kid. And I was like, okay, yeah, you could. Or like My Little Ponies is a thing again.
Okay.
Except for they're all like updated for today. So they're all like a little bit cooler and taller. Like why are they taller?
I don't think the
Taller
ponies
pony.
ever went out. Like my daughters loved those.
Did
too.
they?
Yeah.
Maybe
Well-
it's just they're always there and we just dip in and out.
Dip in and out. Yep.
No, it is going through a toys, the section of a toy store now, or whatever box store. A lot of the toys are the same. It's like, I mean, and even just complete remakes of, like I enjoyed the Ghostbuster action figure line when I was a kid, and I happened to notice that they were making those again, specifically from the animated series. Just like, that's
toys
something.
Toys are so much cooler than what we had. I mean,
Yeah.
they are. They're just made better. They've got more stuff with them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like even like Legos. Legos are awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
they were always great, but now they're really impressive, I think.
Yeah. All right. I don't really have a final thought. Just be good to everybody and better to yourself. All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share the
What?
podcast.
What did you say?
Yeah. You can't tell me what to do.
David's looking for his signature closing. That's what he's going for there.
Oh, yeah.
That's what to catch on.
I'm
Be
working 'em
kind
out.
to each other.
That one.
I'm David Manti.
And better to each other.
Be better. We're going to nix that one. Next week, you're all animals. Race to the bottom. No. All right. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. And email the podcast. You can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You might have noticed, but we didn't get a chance to do the live stream this week. We're going to give it another shot next week. It turns out it's more than just plugging a wire in and hitting play. So we're gonna try it again next week. So if you want to watch us live next week, hopefully Friday. Also, you can subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get the podcast in your inbox first. All right, for Jeff and Anna, I'm David Manti, and this is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.